Bryan!
What's going on, sis? How you doing?
Legit surprised every time.
Yeah. I have no idea. This is the first time I've done this, so.
So, to everyone who's watching, I invited 10 people to join me on here, and I literally started getting texts like 20 minutes before we were going to go live. I was like, how do you do an Instagram live? Never done one of these before. Most people I know are not doing Instagram lives. You're hunkered down doing some other important work. So, This is Bryan Lee. Bryan, tell us who you are.
Yeah, thanks. So I am an architect out of New Orleans, Louisiana, focused on design justice. And we have a small practice called Colloqate Design that really centers civic, communal, and cultural spaces for racial justice. And so our job is really to map the oppressions that we see in the world to the physical spaces that sustain them, and then attempt to dismantle those structures as a means to create a more just built environment and a more just world in general.
What does that mean in
layman's terms?
What is it like?
Yeah, so it really is starting to assess. So for instance, 39% of all of the fossil fuels. If we're talking about climate change, I just heard we were talking about that this last go round. 39% of emissions come from buildings. 40% of all the energy used is coming from buildings, and so you don't solve large-scale issues without recognizing the kind of massive giant in the room that is the physical infrastructure that sustains all of these injustices. And so how are we actively finding and pinpointing the structures, the architecture itself, the planning that sprawls us across spaces, and start to attack those? I'll give you another one. We often talk about kind of ending the carceral state writ large, right? Defunding police, defunding prisons, and we look at the amount of square footage of prisons that exist in the world today. They far exceed the square footage of plantations that we had during slavery, and right, like just in terms of square footage, right? Like there's a massive amount of and on top of that, a lot of them are on the grounds of on slave grounds, right? And so the physical environment that we have continues to sustain levels of oppression that we're not even recognizing. So, challenging that is our job.
I've been told I need to change my glasses. Hold on. I have 2 more left. Which do you want, the clear or the red?
I'm gonna go with the red. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to recycle. I don't have so I've got pretty close. There we go.
I'm just realizing that probably wasn't a question for me. That was probably a question for all of these people.
Okay.
All right.
I can't wait. So I'm trying to bring my nice vibes to this chat. Yeah. So you have been hard at work in this moment, this sort of inflection point in American history, as people are sort of waking up to a lot of the things that you've been talking about and working on for a certain time. And you're an innovator of this field of design justice. The way that we approach architecture and design, how do we use that to further justice and the causes that we care about, building world literally, right? Or making a better world possible within what we build. So tell people about this manifesto that you recently.
I think there is a this work has been centered on 2 kind of consistent facts. One is that we are attempting as an emergent part of our profession to essentially dismantle the privilege and power structures that use architecture and design as a. What? Can you hear me?
I dropped the phone.
There's a lot of talk about glasses in the chat right now. I mean, we could switch focus if we wanted to do this. No, I'm just saying
like the glasses, they come and go. This is here forever. Let's keep focused.
There we go. Yeah, no, I mean, I think in large part talking about the fact that we are attempting to dismantle these systems, but we are also attempting to envision a world in which justice has been achieved, right? And so those are the kind of two components of design justice writ large. And so I think the work we've done is started to center the demands as a way to give a tangible set of action items for people to move this work along. So specifically when we talk about the divest strategies, as everyone in the movement for Black Lives has continued to say, is about defunding and abolishment, but it is also about reinvestment, right? We've talked about you saw the Ben & Jerry's scoops, right?
Yeah. This idea that if we defund the police, that means we can actually fund other things, education and health and environment, parks and all sorts of other things. It's not, there's a balance in the budget, right? And as earlier tonight, show me your budget and I'll tell you your priorities. Interesting to think about.
Talk about that, right? Your values are validated through the spaces and places you design. And so where you put money is not just about, what programs you create, but what structures you create to sustain that set of programs. And so if we're saying that other entities can be first responders in the world, then what are the physical spaces that sustain the effort of those first responders, of those new first responders in the world? When it comes to houseless folks who are houseless, or folks who are dealing with drug addiction, how do we then make sure that the first responders are equipped not just to handle it with their own resources or their own kind of ingenuity as human beings, but we give them the physical resources to sustain and move that work along.
So what is in this manifesto, and where can people? What is the future that you're envisioning?
That we're pushing. So the manifesto breaks out into three parts, and one is really about the divest strategy. So how do we, as a profession, as a design profession, and then more broadly as a activist and advocate community, start to talk about divestment from the carceral state writ large, stop building prisons, stop building jails, stop building police stations in our communities, and again, starting to refocus those. Reinvestment in communities that is centered on the dynamic needs of a neighborhood is another part of the demands. And then I think one of the big things that we really try to talk about is the fact that a lot of wealth in America was derived through land, obviously, and then ultimately through housing. So from 1937 to 1983, we saw an increase in the wealth gap from 1 to 3 to 1 to 13, give or take, and that was almost directly related or in accordance with FHA and the kind of redlining that happened that depressed and suppressed Black families' economic and wealth growth patterns, and saw white families' growth rocket over that time, right? And so thinking about policies, one of the demands is really about thinking about policies that transition our kind of HUD related considerations around area median income, which determines the allocation of resources for affordable housing in communities, to something that's around area median wealth, which reflects the kind of wealth extraction of Black communities over the course of that time. So those are kind of some core components. And then on the tail end of it, we really start to talk about shifting local governance and the ways in which RFPs are written for institutions and governments, and then changing the way that we are taught in profession, right? In our academia. So what does it mean for us to actually teach design justice so that the students who are coming out are actively able to do this work?
So where can people read more about design justice?
Yeah, so I've been writing for City Lab for a few years now. So I just finished an article a few weeks ago about how the built environment is designed to oppress. So you can check that out on City Lab. And I wrote a few more over the past few years that talk about not just our current condition, but this kind of ongoing repeat condition of specifically the person who lives in the White House right now, utilizing physical architecture and physical space to sustain oppression in large ways. So I wrote an article about how the wall along the border is the largest symbol of white supremacy that we would have in this country, right? So I would say check those articles out on City Lab. I would say our website is colloqate.org. You can find more there. There's a tab that says design justice for Black lives. You can check that out, and it gives you not just the demands, but it also gives you a quick link to go ahead and send those demands to your city council, to your mayors, and it allows for us to kind of spread this news beyond where we are.
So, and can people find all that through your Instagram? You've been posting about.
Yeah, I've been posting a lot of that. So you can just come to my Instagram.
Is handles pinned at the bottom?
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Right. Some more of that. What are you? So we're running about 10 minutes behind because I can't stop talking. So I have other questions.
Yeah.
So in this sort of tumultuous, revolutionary inflection point, that we don't know what comes next, right? But we know that something will be different, hopefully, in a positive and beautiful way after this moment. What opportunity do you see? What sort of doors are opening right now for your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest opportunity is that, you know, we were bringing together thousands of people a few weeks ago just to talk about design justice as a core component of our work, but fundamentally as a component of the way we think about planning going forward, the way we think about governance going forward, and it's starting to pick up. And so we still have hundreds and hundreds of people who are a part of this movement right now to kind of continue this process. And the opportunities are to fundamentally shift the way our universities, our local governors, our local governance works, and to radically shift our built environment. Because ultimately, none of that matters if we're not focused on the kind of revolutionary idea that Black spaces are worth investing in, that Black spaces are worth valuing, and that ultimately the things we do to the for and with the most marginalized will serve everyone else in our society. And so we've spent so much time alienating and suppressing and oppressing Black people that all of our ills can be traced back to white supremacy in some form. And so we can actually start to track that out and really do the work.
So your work is centered around justice, about changing the world physically as we live in it. If racism didn't exist, what would you be doing?
Oh, Lord. You know, I would still be designing something, but I would probably be near a beach in a much smaller town around Black people as well. So I think it would still be about, you know, the idea of envisioning. I mean, like my whole world is really wrapped around how we see and envision these kind of Black prototypian spaces that are not devoid of problems, but are it's
I love it.
It's antithetical to utopian in that there is a recognition of problems, but still a forwarding of a vision for the future that moves us forward, right? So it's working in that.
Protopia. What's working?
There we go. Yeah. So that's where I would do. That's where I would be. Y'all can join me.
Still working on making a better world.
Yeah.
So how can we support your work? What's next? How can we help?
Yeah. So there will be a ton of design justice actions over the next 3 to 4 months and ongoing, depending on how we're able to kind of build out the structure of this work. So go to Colloqate Design and you can sign up to join us in this fight. This is for architects, planners, designers, activists, climate engineers, climate scientists, and the like, because we all have to kind of recognize the again, the intersectional considerations of our work. And so please go to colocate.org and look out for DAP Collectiv as a site that's coming as well to kind of center all of this work and allow people to join more readily and more easily.
So Bryan, as well as all guests, are tagged in a previous post here on Julia's account. So if you miss copying this down, I don't want to leave the chat. So click on you can find it in a little bit. And I have one last question for you.
Okay. All right. What we got?
Who would you like to give a shout out to?
Oh man. My partners in crime on this work, Taylor Holloway, Mike Ford, D. Nichols. We often talk about the fact that this work is about de-lionizing individuals and making sure that we are moving and collecting, and sometimes individuals get lifted more than others. So I want to make sure that they are lifted in this work as well. And so I appreciate you giving me the platform, and I want to make sure that they get a shout out as well. So thank you.
So someone put in the comments the colocate.org. So you can find that there. Bryan, let's catch up sometime.
Yeah, I'll give you a shout soon.
Good night. But I'm glad if this is what...
Yeah, this works. Yeah, it happened.
Okay.
I'll be in New York soon. We'll touch base.